Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https:// the shadows printify me, and as always, don't look behind you. The Crossing, what the drone saw in the mountains, still haunts me. Chapter 1. The Briefing. The United Nations forward operating base at Gyumri Delta was barely more than a converted Soviet-era outpost nestled into the arid plateau on the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. Concrete walls crumbled under their own weight. Wind sang through shattered windowpins. Outside, the cold was dry and endless, a vast silence broken only by the intermittent crackle of radios and the distant bark of dogs no one owned. It was nearly dusk when the call came in. Lieutenant Tomas Ionescu leaned over the satellite feed table in the central room, his brow furrowed. Around him, the rest of Convoy 4 gathered. 5 personnel in total, a skeleton unit typical for modern peacekeeping missions no one really expected to succeed. The air inside the room was tight with the scent of old sweat, gun oil, and the metal tang of heating units struggling against the cold. A thin layer of red dust clung to every surface. Tomas tapped the table, and the holographic feed projected a frozen image, a drone-captured wide shot of a remote mountain pass, pockmarked terrain, burnt-out trees, and something more unsettling, a formation, figures, human-shaped, standing still. "What the hell am I looking at?" asked Corporal Rafi Hossin, slouched in a corner with a mug of something that smelled like burnt chicory. "They look like people," said Farah Kapanads, the team's Georgian medic, her voice low and gravelly. "But they're not moving. They're not alive," Tomas replied. He tapped again. The image zoomed. The resolution sharpened just enough to reveal the surface texture. These were human, until they weren't. Salt. The bodies weren't just pale, they glimmered. Crystalline deposits reflected the sunset in brittle, pearlescent hues. 36 of them by rough count. Each one locked in a different pose, arms raised, heads turned, expressions frozen in mid-scream. "No burn marks," said Sergeant Clay Navarro, the team's designated munitions tech, his southern drawl razor-thin. "No trauma, looks like a flash freeze. Shit's biblical." Tomas shook his head. No signs of chemical agents either. No burns, no decomposition, just salt. They were a militia reportedly ambushed, but no one's claimed it. No survivors, no tracks out. "And that formation," said Farah, zooming the image further, "that's not random, that's a spiral." A hush fell over the room. Private Kuro Abe, their communications specialist, cleared his throat. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was with precise clarity. Spiral motifs in Caucasus folklore tend to symbolize rebirth or containment. Not both. Clay arched an eyebrow. "I didn't take this gig to play witch hunter." "You signed on to stabilize an active border conflict," Tomas said quietly. "This is destabilizing." The silence returned. The hum of the outdated projector. The soft ticking of the wall-mounted Geiger unit, always just barely ticking. Tomas straightened. "We leave at 500. 2 Humvees. No air support, too close to contested airspace. We'll make contact with the local Armenian watch post near the site, survey, secure, and extract any potential evidence. We'll keep comms with command every 2 hours." "What are we supposed to do if it happens again while we're there?" Rafi asked, frowning. Farah answered, voice clipped. "Hope we don't taste good with pepper." That night, Tomas didn't sleep. He sat on his cot, staring at a blurred photo tucked into his chest pocket. His sister, younger by 7 years, smiling outside a storefront in Timisoara. She'd texted him a meme the day before. Something stupid about border crossings and coffee rations. Now all he could think about was the way the salt in the photo had gleamed. The shop's sign, the light in her eyes. He looked outside the cracked window across the dark plains. The wind carried something dry and low, not quite a howl, not quite a whisper. Somewhere in the hills beyond, something moved just out of view of the cameras, and it was waiting. Chapter 2, The Spiral Field. The mountain pass looked like it had never known warmth. Wind slithered through the stones with a voice like sand over teeth. Far above them, the ridgelines cradled snow that refused to melt, even though the valley below remained cracked and dry. The conv came to a halt at the edge of the impact zone just after 8:30 hours. Chadeauxs stepped out of the Humvee into air that smelled faintly of copper and ozone. Not blood exactly, something cleaner but far more unnatural. The kind of sterile stench you'd expect in a sealed operating room. It clung to the back of the throat. All units out. Mask up, he ordered. The team obeyed, filtering onto the hard-packed soil with boots crunching over frost-slick gravel. They were still 2 clicks from the Armenian watch post. The signal from it had gone dark the night before. The conv had taken the longer road, circling down from the west to avoid old minefields. Now they stood at the threshold of the anomaly, and it was far worse in person. The salt statues weren't scattered. They were placed. Each stood at precisely the same distance from the next, spaced like cogs in some vast machine. Dozens of human forms in military fatigues, crystallized mid-action, some clutching rifles frozen mid-recoil, others with jaws dislocated wide in an impossible scream. One figure knelt in prayer. Another reached out, fingertips brushing the shoulder of the soldier ahead of him, salt fractured around the fingers as if from sudden, unbearable heat. "Jesus," whispered Farah, breath fogging her faceplate. "Don't touch anything," Chadeauxs said. "Not even the ground between them." The spiral wasn't just a symbol, it was terrain, dug shallow into the hard clay, as if something had carved a trench through the rock and ash. Salt runoff pooled at the lowest points, making it look as though the statues had been leaking or melting. "I count 36, said Abe from behind his camera drone screen, his gloved fingers flicking controls. "Mapping pattern. Now." Chadeauxs crouched beside the nearest figure, a woman with 2 bars on her shoulder, a captain. Her face was frozen in defiance. Her left eye had shattered completely, and a fine dust of crystalline powder scattered out from it, caught by the wind and whisked into the air like breath. "Hold up," said Clay, kneeling by one of the outer perimeter bodies. "This guy's Azerbaijani militia. The one next to him's Armenian. They're mixed." "That's not right," Chadeauxs said. The report said it was an ambush. Why would opposing fighters be caught like this together, without signs of combat? Farah stepped beside another soldier, his hands wrapped around his own throat, because they weren't fighting each other when this happened. There was a low vibration underfoot, barely noticeable, just enough to make the dust shiver along the skin of the salt statues. Kuro Abe adjusted his receiver, getting faint radio interference. Thought it was bleed from satellite relays, but it's rhythmic. Repeating intervals like breathing. The drone feed suddenly glitched, just a flicker, a smear of static across the screen. When it returned, Abe froze. I just saw someone walk through the spiral." "Where?" Chadeauxs turned to him. "Here, look." They gathered around Abe's display. The drone hovered 50 meters up, facing west across the formation. In the feed, a figure, barely visible, obscured by glare, moved between the salt statues. Long arms, upright, hair matted and grey against a shaggy back. And then it turned to look up at the drone, just as the feed blinked out completely. "Was that a person?" Rafi asked, voice too loud in the dead air. "I don't think it was," Abe said flatly. Chadeauxs drew his sidearm and turned to the others. "We move now. Circle the formation, eyes on the hills. Whatever did this, it's still here." "Still here," Clay hissed. "What the hell does that even mean, man?" Farah cocked her head toward the ridgeline above. "Because I just saw something up there, and it saw me." They all turned. At first, there was nothing but shifting clouds and jagged earth. Then movement, not walking, not running, pacing. A tall shape, halfway upright, loping just below the skyline. Covered in what looked like ash-stained fur, limbs longer than they should be, the outline blurring at the edges like heat shimmer. It moved like something that wanted to be seen, but only from a distance. A low growl rose up from the valley below, but none of them made a sound. Not until the wind turned cold and carried a howl back with it, one that sounded like a man and not a man all at once. Chapter 3. The Watch Post. They reached the Armenian observation station by 1300 hours. The sun, dim behind a gauze of pale clouds, cast no real warmth, but it made the salt on their uniforms glisten faintly, like powdered frost. No birds, no insects, no signs of life at all. Chadeauxs signaled for a perimeter sweep as the main team approached the watch post. It stood alone on a rise, tucked into a cleft in the slope overlooking the spiral field. A single concrete bunker, flat roof, slit windows, weather-worn but fortified. A rusted radio tower leaned above it, its wires snapped and draped like vines. The door had been left ajar. "Anyone inside? This is UNPF Convoy Unit 39, Chadeauxs called out. His voice echoed down the hallway beyond the threshold. No answer. He glanced back at the others. Weapons low, safeties off. Inside, the air was colder than outside. Clay shivered visibly as he stepped through. The interior had been ransacked, but not looted. Nothing of value was taken. Rifles still racked. Rations unopened. Personal belongings untouched. Instead, every piece of glass had been broken. Every reflective surface smeared with mud or old blood. Mirrors cracked. Metal scraped. Even the water in a wash basin had been dyed with black ink. Someone didn't want to see their own reflection, Farah muttered. Abe brought up the rear, scanning with a compact handheld LiDAR device. This place isn't giving normal readouts. I'm getting topographical anomalies under the concrete. What kind of anomalies? Chadeauxs asked. Like the station was built over a cave, something deep and breathing. He paused, adjusting the sensitivity. It's vibrating at 5.2 Hz. That's infrasound, Farah said, her voice tight. Below human hearing, it's known to cause nausea, hallucinations, disorientation. Exactly, Abe nodded. Could explain the spiral field. Could also explain why we're seeing things. Or it means the ground beneath us is alive, Clay muttered. They descended into the lower level. 2 floors underground, the bunker opened into what looked like a repurposed Cold War-era shelter. Concrete walls reinforced with corrugated steel, rows of bunks bolted into the floor, a command room with an old CRT radar setup. Most of the screens had been smashed. Cables spilled across the floor like intestines, but one monitor still flickered. It displayed a live feed, grainy black and white, pointed down at the spiral formation. Abe leaned in. This shouldn't be working. Look, Farah whispered. Top right corner. A figure stood in the spiral, a soldier, alone, but the uniforms were too burned to tell which side he belonged to. He was kneeling at the center of the spiral, back arched unnaturally, arms outstretched like a supplicant or a sacrifice. The figure twitched, then slowly looked up, directly into the camera. Abe reached for the feed switch. That's not a recording, it's real time. Then the figure spoke. No sound came through the speakers, but its mouth moved, deliberate, slow. Abe fumbled for the volume. The feed crackled, then hissed. A faint sound emerged, like many voices speaking together beneath water. Then one phrase cut through. "We are already inside." The screen burst with static. Behind them, a scream rang out. Clay. They bolted from the control room and down the hall, Chadeauxs in the lead, weapon raised. The door to the munitions wing was open now. It had been locked when they entered. Clay was inside, alone, but his eyes weren't right. They were entirely black, not just the pupil, the entire sclera. He stood stiff, as if held upright by wires, his head twitching slightly, like he was sinking to something invisible. "Clay?" Chadeauxs asked, stepping closer. Clay opened his mouth. "Do you remember the snow?" he asked. But it was not his voice. It was layered. Male and female, old and young, spoken from somewhere far away. Then his body convulsed, like a marionette dropped mid-act. Chadeauxs caught him as he fell, eyes rolled back, pulse strong, breathing irregular, but alive. He was sleep-talking, Farah whispered. Like someone else was using him. "Prep him for evac," Chadeauxs said, though he wasn't sure to where. "Something's using the field, projecting, possessing." Abe stepped into the hall and pointed toward the western slope. "We're not alone." They all turned. There were tracks in the snow, not boot prints, paw prints, but massive. Like a wolf, only far too long. The claws had carved deep furrows in the gravel, and they circled the bunker. Farah said it first. "It's hunting." Chapter 4, Echoes in the Ice. The temperature dropped 6 degrees in under an hour. By the time the peacekeepers sealed clay in the medical Humvee, frost had gathered along the edges of the bunker's entry ramp. The salt in the statues outside had begun to crack, delicate fractures tracing from crown to foot, as if something beneath the crust of their bodies wanted out. Farah stood at the watchtower window, scanning the ridgeline through a pair of thermal goggles. Still nothing warm, but the winds wrong. Tomas adjusted the strap of his chest rig and looked over his shoulder at her. "Define wrong." "It's blowing against the terrain," she said. "Should be coming downslope, but it's coming from the center of the spiral. That's uphill." "Maybe it's," she cut him off. "No, it's not wind. It's breath." Below in the valley, something let out a low, bellowing moan. Not quite an animal call, not quite a storm. It vibrated the fillings in their teeth. Abe burst into the comms room. "Got something." The others crowded around him as he pulled up a recovered file from the radar terminal, one that had survived whatever destroyed the rest of the feeds. "Here, dated 48 hours before the incident. Audio log from the Armenian Watch Post commander, Colonel Hakabian." He hit play. "We've stopped using names. They wake it. It doesn't like when we speak to each other directly. All unit callouts are numeric now. It first appeared in our periphery. We thought it was a beast, some massive dog or wolf, black fur, upright, running between our patrols. But when we went to track it, the snow was clean. Until nightfall. That's when the messages began. Not radio, not in the wire, inside the skull. Voices in languages we've never known, asking if we remember the valley, asking if we remember dying. One soldier went out alone after curfew. We found what was left of him in the morning, not eaten, not torn, just erased, like God hit delete. The others began freezing mirrors, said they could see it standing behind them, never moving, never blinking. "We are abandoning post. The last rites have been spoken." The audio ended in static. Tomas was the first to speak. He said, "Don't use names. And remember dying," Abe added, his voice quieter than usual. From outside, there was a sound like ice cracking. Then another. A sharp snap echoed across the valley. Farah turned back to the window and gasped. One of the salt statues had moved, only slightly, but it no longer faced the same direction. The angle of the shoulders had shifted, as if its attention had turned toward the bunker. And it wasn't alone. "Jesus," she whispered. "They're all turning to face us." The wind outside howled, sudden and sharp, curling through the gaps in the concrete like a scream too long buried. The spiral field began to shift. Salt flaked from the statues like snow, drifting in sheets across the ground. Some of the forms began to crumble from within, like the exteriors were no longer strong enough to contain whatever they had once encased. Then came the prints. Massive, paw-like depressions began forming in the ice-backed soil just beyond the first ring of statues. But nothing made them. The footprints appeared as if impressed by an invisible weight. Step by step, they circled the formation, once, twice, then broke into a straight line directly toward the bunker. "We need to leave," Tomas said. "Now." "Where?" Farah shot back. "Every vehicle is downrange of those things." Abe looked up from the audio logs. "We could go higher. That ridge the drone came down from, if we climb it before dark." "Before dark," Tomas cut in. "You think nightfall changes this?" "No," Abe said, voice low. "I think it completes it." The temperature dropped again. The lights in the bunker flickered, and for just a moment, reflected in the far end of the corridor, was a face. Half canine, half rotted, the eyes like frozen tar pits, watching, waiting, then gone. Chapter 5, The Ridge. The climb began before first light. No one spoke. The air had changed overnight, heavier, slower, as if the valley was reluctant to release them. Snow no longer crunched, it sighed beneath their boots like packed ash. Tomas led the ascent, rifle slung over his shoulder, watching for prints that shouldn't be there. Farah brought up the rear, eyes darting to every sound, none of which belonged to birds. because the birds had stopped, even the crows. Behind them, the bunker was barely visible through the mist. Below that, the salt spiral stretched out like a giant eye. The statues were no longer aligned. Some had collapsed. Others leaned as if wind-blown or drawn toward something. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Clay's body was gone. Only a thin trail of glassy blood, hardened in jagged streaks, remained where his stretcher had been. "We keep moving," Tomas had said when they found it. "That's all we can do." They'd packed light, rations, canteens, sidearms, Abe's sapma, and a flare gun. Nothing electronic had functioned since the signal spike. Whatever EMP surge had fried the equipment hadn't just jammed their gear, it had sterilized it. They were blind. Halfway up the ridge, Farah stopped. "Do you feel that?" Tomas turned. "What?" She didn't answer. She just knelt, gloved hand pressed to the snow. "There's a pulse," she said, "a tremor beneath the ice." They all paused, waited. Abe knelt too. "It's rhythmic." "Heartbeat," Tomas offered, frowning. "Maury like breathing," Farah whispered. They didn't speak again until the ridge opened into a shelf, an overlook flanked by dead pines and broken rock. From here, they could see the entire valley. It wasn't just the salt field. There were more spirals, 3, maybe 4, faint, large, as if the earth itself had been scarred by something walking in enormous circles over generations. "What the hell is this place?" Abe breathed. Farah turned in place, scanning the trees with binoculars. "There's something else. Northwest tree line, 500 meters, looks like a structure." Tomas unslung his rifle. "Let's go." They made the approach in silence, weapons drawn. The snow thickened, clinging to their sleeves, their lashes. Every tree looked hunched, watching. Then they saw it. A shed, old Soviet prefab. Cement walls half swallowed by earth and lichen. One side of the roof had collapsed under a drift, exposing what looked like a hatch in the floor. The metal was newer than the rest. Clean, stainless. A newer facility, Abe guessed. Buried. Maybe post-Soviet. Farah reached out to test the handle, then stopped. Her eyes went wide. "Don't," they turned. Etched in the door's steel was a symbol, a spiral made of teeth, and below it, crudely scratched into the frost, "The one who opens remembers everything." Inside the hatch, the air was warm. Not heated, biologically warm. They descended into darkness, Tomas's flare casting long, twitching shadows. The stairs were damp, the walls slick with some kind of film, not mold, not oil. Abe ran a finger through it and held it up to the light. Salt. At the base, the corridor split in 3. The central path opened into a room, a monitoring station. Dead monitors lined the walls, their screens cracked, some melted. Biological readouts printed on long reels of waxed paper spilled from a busted console. Farah unrolled one. "What language is this?" Tomas looked over her shoulder. "Armenian, but mixed. There's Georgian, even Cyrillic. Like it was written by..." He stopped. "What?" Abe asked. "Like it was written by people having different dreams, but dreaming the same shape." Then he turned. There was a mirror at the end of the room, cracked, smudged with fingerprints. But through it, he saw a figure, taller than a man, furred. Its head like a dog's, but the mouth was wrong, too wide, too full of black. It stood just behind them. But when Tomas spun, rifle raised, nothing was there. Only footprints in the salt-covered floor, still wet. Chapter 6, The Dreaming Spiral. They sealed the hatch behind them, but it made no difference. The cold followed them back underground, not physically, but in sensation. The kind of cold that sat inside the joints. The kind that reminded you of old wounds. The hallway split again. To the left, a door marked in spray paint with a warning they couldn't read. Letters slashed across the metal in what looked like tar. To the right, a short hallway ending in a glass window smeared from the inside. Beyond it, more spiral patterns. Not on the floor, on the walls, carved into flesh. "Hospital wing," Abe guessed, voice thin. Farah took a step forward, studying the faint shapes behind the glass. "Those aren't patients." They were wrong. Whatever they were, bare-chested, torsos opened and suspended like anatomical diagrams. Each face wore a metal breathing mask. Each limb ended in surgical pins instead of fingers. Veins wrapped around their heads like halos. Tubes fed them from something pulsing in the ceiling, the fluid the color of melted snow. All of them were arranged in spirals. Human spirals. Is this some kind of experiment? Tomas asked, backing away. No, Abe murmured. This is a shrine. The hallway behind them creaked. They turned as one. The hatch they'd sealed above had opened again, slowly, without sound. Back up, Tomas said, raising his rifle. No, Farah said, eyes wide. Listen. They held still. From the open hatch came laughter, but not human laughter. It gurgled, wet, wheezing, like something imitating a sound it had only ever heard secondhand. Then came the whispers, soft, untranslated, familiar. Each of them heard something different. Tomas heard his brother's voice, long dead in a fire, laughing like he had before the screams. Farah heard her mother, speaking in a language Farah never learned, but understood perfectly in that moment. Abe heard no voice at all, only his own thoughts, spoken back to him with slight alterations. The light flickered, and the spiral on the wall shifted, no longer static. It moved, slowly, like something was writhing behind the paint. The walls shimmered like oil-slicked skin. Beneath their feet, the floor vibrated with a new rhythm, a beat, a pulse, a dream. I think we're inside it, Abe whispered. The spiral's not a symbol, it's a neural echo, a structure grown from repeated thought, memory with mass. That makes no sense, Tomas muttered. Neither does what's happening to us, Farah snapped. Behind them, the glass shattered. The spiral people moved, no sound, no twitch, just repositioned. Arms now pointed toward the hallway. One raised its hand, pressed a long finger of bone to the side of its head, and slowly tapped. Remember, 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 Tomas fired. The report of the rifle echoed down the hall like thunder, but when the light cleared, nothing had changed. No bullet hole, no damage, just the spiral burned brighter now, white hot. A voice bloomed from behind their eyes, not spoken, impressed. You walk inside the thought. You name the shape. And the shape NAMESU, Farah screamed. The floor collapsed beneath her. She disappeared into darkness. Tomas lunged, barely catching her arm. Abe scrambled to help, but he too froze as something moved in the glass's reflection. Something with yellow eyes and paws that dragged long, curled claws behind it. Its teeth were wrong, not for eating, for counting. They pulled Farah up, shaking, her eyes unfocused. What did you see? Tomas asked, breath ragged. Farah didn't respond. She just lifted her arm and showed them her palm, carved into the flesh in spiraling script. It's already too late. Chapter 7, Blood Memory. They ran, not upward, down. Every instinct screamed at them to return to the surface, to escape the tunnels, to get back to the satellite conv and call for evac. But Farah's arm changed everything. The spiral carved into her palm hadn't been there before the fall. The cuts were healing too fast. It was Abe who said it first, as they descended a rust-slick stairwell lit only by their flickering helmet lamps. This isn't possession, it's integration, Tomas snapped. What the hell does that mean? It means it's not trying to kill us, Abe answered, sweat trailing down his jaw. It's trying to teach us. The hallway at the bottom of the stairs was dry, bone dry. Salt clung to every inch of the walls, packed into the floor, curling in windless drifts like snowbanks. The tunnel stretched in a perfect arc, a corridor dug by machine, but smoothed by something older. Faint etchings marked the ceiling, glyphs burned into the steel, each one resembling different species of eye. Human, wolf, bird, something insectoid. Watching, at the far end, a sealed vault door, marked not with letters but with a handprint, not paint. Blood turned white by age and salt. Farah approached it. Before anyone could stop her, she pressed her palm to it. The door hissed and began to open. A retinal scanner would have made more sense, Tomas said bitterly. It didn't ask for the eye, Abe whispered. It asked for the memory behind the hand. The air inside was freezing. The walls were lined with stone shelves, each stacked with tapes. Not digital drives, not SSDs. Old, analog, magnetic reel-to-reel tapes. Hundreds, thousands, all labeled in Russian, Azeri, Armenian, and something older. Letters etched with a bone stylus. Some reels were dated before the invention of the tape recorder. Farah stepped forward. What is this? Abe moved to one of the players and loaded a tape. It clicked on. Static. Then a voice. English. Clipped. Exhausted. We thought we were burying the weapon, but we weren't. We were feeding it. The spiral is not a symbol. It is a mouth. Each death adds memory. Each memory builds shape. Do not name it. Do not map it. Do not think of it as a thing. It is a pattern, a sequence that dreams in reverse. The tape screamed. Abe yanked it out. Farah clutched her head. Blood leaked from her ears. It spoke to me. What did it say? She looked at them, terrified. It said, "We remember your grandfather." Tomas froze. "My grandfather served here," he said, voice dry. "Cold War. They said he died in a mining collapse." "Did he?" Abe asked quietly. Tomas looked at the shelves, found one tape. It was labeled, Konstantinov Sergei, Unit 6, Witness. He loaded it and listened to his grandfather beg someone not to bury him alive, not to feed him to the walker between echoes. The voice trembled as it whispered. "It walks on two legs, but it isn't man. It waits in the salt, listening for its name. We are not peacekeepers. We are gardeners. We sow the blood and the pattern drinks it." Suddenly, howls from behind the vault, dozens, some high, some low, and one deep and rattling, too deep, the kind of sound a ribcage makes when it forgets it's meant to protect. Farah stood motionless. She held a reel of tape to her chest. "I know what this is," she whispered. "What?" Abe asked. "It's not a facility, it's a graveyard." Tomas backed away from the vault and saw movement in the salt, something large shifting through it, too smooth to be walking. Farah turned to Abe. "Have you been dreaming in spirals?" He nodded. She didn't smile. "Then it's already started." Chapter 8. The salt that remembers. The tunnel was collapsing, not with rubble or fire, but with time. The walls groaned as something passed through them, not behind or beneath, but within the material, like a signal riding the grain of stone. The analog recorders began whirring on their own, vomiting spools of black tape, whispering names in a dozen dialects. Abe Malik, born of silence. Tomas Kurian, marked by unclean blood. Farah Jahani, chosen by the cycle. "We remember." Tomas grabbed his sidearm. "Shut it off, shut it all off." Abe stood frozen, staring into the vault, where the salt had begun to rise, like breath. It wasn't dust or sediment anymore. It was moving, spiraling up in twisting limbs of compressed crystal, forming spires that bent inward like the ribs of a great beast. Farah held tight to the reel she'd taken, her fingers now cracked and pale, like the blood had left her body. Her voice dropped. "We're inside its mind. This place, it thinks. Then we can destroy it," Tomas hissed. "We blow the tunnel, seal it for good." But Abe didn't move. His eyes locked onto one of the shelves. Shelf 42B, a reel labeled MALLICK, 1956. He reached for it. "Tomas," Farah said sharply. "Stop him." But Abe had already slotted it into the player. It clicked, static, then a voice, young, afraid. "My name is Dawud Malik. My son will not remember me. They are taking me to the vault. They say I must feed the cycle. I am not afraid. I only pray the spiral forgets my child's name." Abe dropped to his knees. "That's my grandfather." Farah knelt beside him, gently removed the headphones. He was weeping now, but not from pain. He knew, Abe whispered. "All this time my family was part of it." From the tunnel behind, a noise, a dragging sound, not footsteps, something heavier, clawed, scraping the salt, slow, deliberate. Tomas raised his weapon, flashlight beam trembling. He swept the corridor, saw nothing, but the air grew wet, breathy, like something exhaling in intervals just behind their necks, then a shape. At first, only a silhouette at the far bend, but as it moved forward, the outline sharpened. A hunched figure with elongated limbs and a head like a Canaan skull crowned in horns made of salted bone. Its feet were wrong, digitigrade, like a beast, and the space around it distorted, waves of heat and static bleeding through the salt. Farah didn't run. She reached into her coat and pulled out the reel. "I think it wants us to remember." Tomas turned. "You're not giving it that tape. It already has everything else," she said. This is the last piece. We're not the first peacekeepers here, just the first to survive long enough to become witnesses." The creature stepped fully into the light. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. Its ribcage moved like gills, opening and closing, pulling air from the memory of lungs. Then it spoke, not with a mouth, but with every recorder in the vault erupting at once. Do you know your name? Or just the name they gave you when they taught you to forget? Salt poured from the creature's joints with every movement, falling in spirals that didn't touch the floor. They hovered midair like a map of something deeper. Abe stood, face pale, hands shaking. I know what this is now. It's not a monster. Farah turned toward him. Then what? It's a record. A living record of every atrocity this land ever buried. They fled, back up the spiral tunnel as the walls began to shift, rippling with scenes not their own. Women in winter coats pressed against a cave wall, whispering prayers before they vanished in a flash of light. Soldiers frozen mid-salute. Children weeping as gas hissed through broken pipes. Every step upward was someone else's memory, and the thing behind them followed, not walking, unfolding. Tomas tossed a charge at the vault, hit the detonator. A thud, a rumble. Salt turned to smoke. The ground stopped shaking. But when they emerged into the night, back to the ridge, the air was dead still. The convoy, gone. Radio, static, no stars overhead, just a pale spiral moon. One none of them had ever seen before. Chapter 9, The Hill That Remembers. They didn't speak for the first hour. The wind had stopped, not slowed. Stopped like something had turned off the world's breath. Farah held her compass up to the sky. The needle spun in lazy circles, twitching every time she blinked. Tomas paced the gravel verge with his rifle low, staring across the jagged Armenian hills for movement, any movement. But it was Abe who stood at the edge of the overlook, eyes locked on a stretch of broken plateau that shouldn't have been there. No ridgeline, no shadows, just a perfect circle of open field where the terrain should have sloped downward. That hill wasn't here when we came in, Abe said. Farah's voice cracked from dryness. Could have missed it. The maps are 10 years out of date. No, Abe said. It's not a hill, he pointed. At first Farah saw nothing but heat, mirage and haze. But as she stepped forward, something shifted. The field shimmered, not with heat, with detail. Structures began to take shape, half buried in tall grass, rising in segments like something remembering how to stand. Outlines of old shelters, tin roofs, and burned-out convoys shimmered into semi-visibility, like a memory caught between waking and sleep. Tomas lowered his rifle. What the hell is this? They moved toward it. As they walked, the grass underfoot grew brittle, less like flora, more like desiccated nerve endings. Each step left a trail of grey behind them, and with every yard, the world behind them disappeared. Not dimmed, not fogged, gone. Farah dared not look back. The hill wasn't dirt, it was bodies. Compacted, fossilized, melted into a smooth, rolling mound, a war grave without markers, without age. Faces surfaced in the stone, eyes closed, mouths agape. But none of them looked human anymore. They were witnesses, trapped mid-confession. Half-formed words carved into cheeks, foreheads, jaws, like they had tried to speak their truth but never got the chance. Words like, traitor, ashfall, we saw them coming. Salt preserves all. Farah fell to her knees at the base of the mound. There's a pattern, she whispered. These are arranged. Tomas crouched beside her. They were posed. No, recorded, Abe said. He was pointing again, this time at the very top of the mound. A single flag, black, no emblem, just a spiral stitched in coarse thread, barely visible. But the moment they saw it, the wind started again. Hard, wrong. It blew in circles, not lines, curling their hair inward, pushing dust and air in tight vortices. Tomas grabbed his rifle again, but it was already too late. Something was moving under the hill. The stone cracked. Veins of salt pushed upward like roots. And then it stood. The dogman, if it had ever been a dog or man, no longer resembled either. It was taller now, its back arched unnaturally, arms dragging behind like weighted chains. Its head twisted, not as if turning to look, but as if unraveling from some deeper place. From its joints, salt poured like blood. It's guarding the hill, Farah whispered. No, Abe said. It is the hill. It charged. Tomas screamed, fired. Bullets passed through it, but in slow motion, as if the air had thickened. One round struck something in its neck, but the wound sealed instantly. As it neared, the ground itself began to decay. Grass withered, roots coiled into tight knots, and the air hummed with spoken names. Abe fell, and something rose to meet him. Not Farah, not Tomas, the memory of someone else. A soldier in a UN helmet, face burned beyond recognition, whispering through lips fused with salt. "You'll be part of the record too." The last thing Abe saw was the spiral, burned into the earth, into the thing's chest, into the sky. Then he woke, alone, on the ridge. No Tomas, no Farah, only the sound of a recorder spooling to a stop somewhere just behind him, and the faint taste of salt on his tongue. Chapter 10, False Flag. It was morning when Abe found the wreckage. What was left of their convoy, 3 armored UN vehicles and a supply truck, lay shattered along the old riverbed trail, as if they'd been thrown by something titanic. The hulls had been torn, not blasted, peeled open, interiors shredded and blackened with soot. But there were no bodies, no blood, no drag marks, just the smell of scorched metal and the dull ringing in his ears that hadn't stopped since he woke. Tomas, Farah, nothing. He checked the comms, dead. The emergency beacon smashed. The field tablet still worked barely. But when he tried to bring up the satellite overlay, the screen blinked once and loaded a single image, not a map, not terrain, a spiral, black on white, spinning infinitely slow. Abe wandered for 2 hours before he saw the flags. Torn, sun-bleached Armenian and Azerbaijani banners knotted together and hung upside down on crooked poles. Dozens of them arranged in a jagged ring around a structure that hadn't been there before. A field chapel made of salt bricks and rebar, each brick marked with names, coordinates, dates. One wall bore a word etched over and over again. Record, record, record. He pushed through the half-open door, rifle shaking in his grip. Inside, it wasn't a chapel at all. It was a listening station. Old CRT monitors stacked against the walls, their screens glowing softly with grainy footage. Men and women in camo, whispering, crying, speaking names into handheld radios. Some recognized as fallen comrades, others as complete strangers. One monitor showed Farah. She was sitting against a rock wall, arms wrapped around her knees, lips moving silently. Abe slammed the side of the monitor. "Where are you?" The screen flickered, then changed. Now it showed him, not standing but seated, just like Farah, speaking. Behind him something stood, just out of frame, watching, breathing. The speakers kicked in all at once, and every screen said the same phrase. The record must survive the living. He ran, back into the hills, up toward the smoke trail he'd seen earlier that morning, a plume rising in defiance of the dead stillness of the region. His boots slipped in salt-slick mud. Wind whipped around him again, but this time the sound was different. Laughter, not joyful, not taunting, familiar, his own. The rise crested, revealing the remains of a campfire, Farah's satchel, her sidearm, half of a journal, the last page torn and stained, but legible. It comes when you remember, that's the curse. We made it real by witnessing it, our reports, our recordings, that's the offering. It eats the facts, becomes them. Below in the clearing someone stood, Tomas, or the shape of him. He turned, but it wasn't Tomas anymore. It wore the uniform, carried the rifle, but its face was blank. A polished slate of stretched skin, no features, just the faint imprint of a mouth opening in slow, silent speech. Abe stepped back, too late. The wind surged forward like a wave and wrapped around his body. He fell again, down the slope, head spinning, eyes full of salt. And when he landed, something in his chest clicked, not a bone, a memory. A childhood prayer whispered in the dark, not Armenian, not Azeri, but something older, something from beneath the salt. Something true. His eyes opened. The ground beneath him glowed faintly, symbols etched into the dirt, mirroring the spiral. A drone hovered above, silent, watching. Abe smiled bitterly. Of course, you were always watching. The drone rotated and pointed toward a final bunker buried deep in the valley beyond. A last threshold. Chapter 11, the archive that breathes. The bunker wasn't on any map. It was old. Older than the conflict, older than the borders, maybe older than the flags that once gave meaning to this fractured land. Built into the granite spine of the hillside, it was hidden behind a veil of ash trees and thorn brush. The rusted door stood open, the lock shattered. Abe stood at the entrance, rifle trembling in his hands. Inside, cold blackness and a smell, salt, blood, and paper. He stepped inside. The air changed immediately. No wind, no echo. It felt thick, like walking into a vacuum sealed in flesh and silence. Flickering lights guided him. Old halogens bolted into the walls, some barely buzzing to life. The walls were concrete, reinforced with steel, but layered with something else, etchings. Spirals, glyphs, teeth-like runes etched in frantic patterns by a dozen different hands. But they were all the same symbols. Abe raised the field tablet, still recording, still tracking him. The drone's signal had led him here after all. Document everything, he muttered. Isn't that what they always say? At the bottom of a slanted stairwell, he found the archive. A chamber of shelves, drawers, canisters, and tape reels, labeled with numbers and countries and years that didn't make sense together. Operation DIMITRI 1938, future forecasts. Incident 614, Tehran/Yakutsk/Saltfield. Anatolian phonemic tests, vowels as bait. Dogman contact logs escaped. Voiceprint 12. UN peacekeeper Abe N. OBSERVING. He stopped. That last one. His name. The case held a spool of magnetic tape and a typed transcript. Subject observes spiral patterns. Subject hears own voice repeated through static and dreams. Entity has assumed 3 forms: guilt, command, and the familiar. Entity not local. Entity is viral. Abe turned the reel over and saw a second label. Do not speak aloud. Behind the shelves, a second room, soundproofed. A console against one wall. Wires snaking out into the earth. Screens covered in plastic tarps. A steel table. Strapped to the table, Tomas, eyes open, breathing. But his chest moved backward, inhaling when it should exhale. Like something inside him was trying to remember how to be human. His eyes blinked sideways, then focused. Abe, his voice. But not his voice. A trace too high, too smooth. No fear. Abe raised his rifle. What are you, Tomas? Or the thing that wore him smiled faintly. You're the last one who remembers. That's all we needed. Now we can leave this place. We've been documented. The monitors switched on. Every screen showed Abe from different angles. From inside the truck. From the salt chapel. From his own dreams. Behind him, the door groaned. Another figure entered. Farah. Eyes dark, face sunken, mouth stitched shut with red twine. She held out a roll of blank paper. Abe reached for it instinctively. Words appeared, scrawling themselves onto the page. It BRATHES through the ONES who speak. IT leaves through the ONES who tell. Tomas began to convulse. His form rippling, bones rearranging like liquid beneath the skin. Something inside wanted out. Abe didn't hesitate. He lit the fuel tanks stacked near the shelving units. The flames took quickly, too quickly, as if the whole archive had been waiting to burn. As he dragged Farah from the room, the air behind him collapsed inward, not like an explosion, but like a memory being erased. They emerged from the bunker as the first snow began to fall. No wind, no voices, just the sound of water trickling down from the melting salt formations in the valley below. Farah looked at him, the twine gone from her lips. You saw it, she asked. Abe didn't answer. He only nodded and whispered, but I won't tell it. Chapter 12. The things we do not write down. They walked for hours, down from the hills, past the valley where the convoy had been swallowed, past the withered watchtower. The ash trees were black with frost, and the sky, grey as a spent fire, hung low above them, oppressive and wide. No helicopters came. No search parties, no static on the radio. Only Farah's steady breath beside him and the sound of footsteps that sometimes didn't match theirs. Abe didn't ask anymore. He'd stopped trusting questions. They made things worse. They fed something. By dawn, they reached the ghost village. Stone houses stripped to bone. Frozen laundry still hanging from wires that no longer connected anything. Chickens petrified in place, salt crusted like skin. A windmill spun without wind. Inside a gutted church, they found an old satellite uplink terminal, half buried in dust. Cracked screen. antennas angled toward no known sky. But Farah, silent since the bunker, approached it with certainty. She pulled something from her pocket, a torn page from a UN field manual. On the back, a child's drawing, a spiral in red crayon. "I dreamt this before we deployed," she said quietly. "It was on my bedroom wall when I woke up." Abe found a generator behind the altar. He poured in what fuel they had left and turned the crank. The lights stuttered. The satellite dish twitched once, then froze, aimed somewhere between the mountains. The screen blinked alive. UN secure link, Operation Bastion, please enter authentication. Abe typed his credentials. For a moment, nothing. Then a message appeared. "Your transmission is not in compliance. Your report is not sanctioned. This incident does not exist." Then, "How many are you?" Abe blinked. He looked at Farah. She was gone. The room seemed larger now, or perhaps he was smaller. Something moved behind the altar, long and hunched and heavy. The salt wind pushed inward, curling around him like breath. He turned back to the screen. "How many are you?" he typed. "One." Then after a pause, "For now," he uploaded everything. The drone footage, the tapes from the bunker, the images of the salt statues, Farah's spiral. He wrote a single-line debrief. "We saw it." Then, without deleting the logs, he shut the machine down, left it humming in silence. Outside, a snow began to fall that did not melt on the ground. It lingered in small heaps, like something left watching. Abe stood at the edge of the village and looked back one last time. The valley was gone. Only a ridge of white stone remained, rising like teeth from the earth. He didn't speak. He didn't write. He simply walked. Epilogue UN redacted file 7C. Internal memo to Oversight Committee 3ARE. Operation Bastion debrief status. Closed. Transmission received from Unit Lead Abraham Nkosi. Subject demonstrates signs of persistent exposure to Class S viral pattern language. Preliminary review confirms. Subject's spoken report matches incident types previously marked unspeakable. All field footage now under quarantine. Copies isolated at Site 12 read. The term dogman has been reassigned classification Tier 2 cultural artifact. Disinformation campaign in progress. Do not speak the name. Do not archive the name. Do not look for the name. We are not trying to kill it. We are trying to forget it. You made it back for now. But the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch. They wait. And perhaps they remember you now, too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe. But know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.